Hi there, I'm Jim, and welcome everyone to the Equipment Gnar podcast. This is the best place for snowboarding equipment news, reviews, and one idiot's opinion on the best way to slide down a snowy hill. On this podcast, I want to be talking all things equipment related to snowboarding. I want to give my opinion, I want to go out and test new equipment, and I want to let you all know what the best way to get down the hill is. So today, we're going to be talking about the Burton step-on system. Specifically, we're going to get into what they are, how they're different from normal bindings, and my personal experience using them on the mountain. So what is the Burton step-on system? It is a different style of binding that allows for easier access in and out of the binding, so you spend less time strapping in to get on your snowboard and more time just shredding the hill. So how do they work? Basically, they have two little nubs on the front of your boots. Those nubs correspond with some matching attachments on the bindings that your boot kind of slides into. And then on the back of your boot, there's a similar thing that has more of a ratchet action to it that slides into a receiver on the back of the binding. And that's the one that actually holds you in there. With this new design that they have come up with for this the binding boot system, the idea is to allow you to literally just plant your foot down into the binding and get fully strapped in and connected to your board without having to bend over or mess with any straps. Getting yourself out of the bindings is also made very, very easy. There are little levers on the outside of each of the bindings that when pressed down, release the back of the binding attachment and allows you to just kind of rip your foot out. Now, it does take a little bit more force to get your foot out because you have to get the front nubbin attachments out of the front of the binding with your boot, and that takes a little bit of a twist and a little bit of a yank with your foot. But after one or two times getting your feet in and out of the bindings, it becomes very intuitive on how to get in and out of them. And that's kind of the overview of how they work. Now, the good news with them is Burton was smart and designed them so that you can use them with any snowboard out there. I personally ride an ancient Millennium 3 snowboard, and these bindings worked fine. They do use the Burton custom channel system to attach, so there were only 2 screw-in points for the actual snowboard to get on, which isn't the most secure feeling in the world, but it still worked with my ancient snowboard. Now, apart from getting the bindings onto my snowboard, it was very straightforward getting the rest of the setup done. It uses the normal Burton foot stance adjuster, and it had enough forward and back travel on the bindings to get it into a nice sweet spot on my snowboard and get everything working and comfortable for me, which was really nice. Now, overall, my experience with them on the mountain was excellent. I got to rent a pair for the day when I was snowboarding at Vail one day. I went to the Burton store, rented them there and everything. They were super nice there. And I got to try them out for a full day of snowboarding, which was amazing. They were truly awesome to use on the mountain. Getting to the first lift of the day, it was a very strange experience stepping into them fully for the first time. I ride regular stance, so getting my left foot in first and fully settled in there and everything, and looking down at my feet and not seeing a toe strap or a foot strap going over. It was a weird feeling at first to get used to, only seeing, your foot just basically dangling the snowboard below it. But I mean, after the first lift ride, I didn't give it much of a second thought outside of that. It was just how it was. The first run of the day after getting off of the lift, it was a magnificent experience stepping into them for the first time fully with both feet attached, didn't have to bend over, didn't have to sit down or anything. And I was off shredding almost immediately. Riding the first run of the day with the Burton step-ons on was magnificent. They felt just like pretty much any other binding that I've ever ridden on. They were responsive, and they were a dream. And then once I got down to the next lift, it was so easy to get out of them. I just pushed a little lever and ripped my foot out, and I was ready to go. Riding them all day long too, I started to get used to the action of it, of getting in and out of the bindings, of how they felt under my feet, and just the whole idea of not having something concretely attached to my snowboard. You didn't really think about it towards the end of the day. Now, getting into some pros and cons of the bindings compared to my other set. My other set are a much more traditional, double strap over the boot bindings. They're made by 540. I got them really cheap off of Amazon, but they do the trick. They're a great binding. So I'm going to be comparing and contrasting the Burton step-on system with my more traditional 540 double strap system. So the pros for the step-ons, they were really, really easy to get in and out of. It only took once or twice getting in and out of the board to get used to it. I even managed to get into the board while moving a couple of times. I definitely knocked myself over one time trying to step into the bindings while moving, and took pretty nice little spill on that one. But with some practice, it came pretty easily. And that was wonderful. And just allowing for that much less time sitting down in the snow, less time with a wet, snowy butt, it made my day so much nicer and so much quicker. The first day back on my old 540 bindings it was a brutal reminder of how much time you spend either double over or sitting down getting those bindings on. Also, the ease of getting in and out of these bindings allowed for me to keep up with my skier buddies a lot quicker and a lot easier. They didn't have to spend so much time waiting for me at the top of each lift. And it was kind of fun to race them a little bit. When you come off of the lift, you can get a few good skate pushes and stomp right in and, kind of show them up a little bit, be the first one on the run. Now, another thing that I've seen more than I've done is these Burton step-on bindings open up a lot of opportunities for new tricks, where people will start by skating and pushing and then hit a rail with only one foot put in, and then on the dismount from the rail, they'll stomp on in to go off of a pretty big booter and get some sick grabs and twists in off the jump. It is the creativity that this allows for by being able to switch between 1 foot in and double foot in tricks it can create some really, really cool trick options and everything. And by far the biggest benefit of these step-on bindings, especially for resort riding, is catwalks. They make catwalks so much easier to deal with when you're snowboarding. No longer do you have to try and decide between, am I going to stick it out and, do a little hip scoot to try and get over this catwalk, or am I going to unboot one of my boots? Because it's so easy to unstrap, get some momentum up with some quick skating, and get right back into the bindings that you don't even really think about it. It's just second nature. And turning one of the most annoying parts of snowboarding at a resort into something that you hardly even think about opens the mountain up so much to people. It is such a great benefit of these bindings, and one of the biggest reasons why I now want a pair, unfortunately. Now, on the other side, the con side, I did notice that these bindings were a lot looser. They at least felt looser than my other bindings. Now, that might just be a combination of my boots being stiffer and my own personal bindings being a lot stiffer than the boots that I rented for the step-on system and this particular side of the step-on. But they were looser than mine. They had more play front and back, and with the front connectors, the little nubbins on the step-on bindings, I did notice some play there with, just leaning around and getting a few butters in and that kind of stuff. I didn't notice that being very much of a disadvantage, though, once I actually got used to it. I mean, once I was expecting more flex in my setup and everything, you can account for it a lot. And I don't know if there are any stiffer options for the step-on, but in general, it seemed like the step-ons are going to be a looser fit. You're not going to get quite the responsiveness you're going to get from, some more traditional, some tighter over-the-boot strap options. Also, as I've mentioned before, they're expensive. The Burton step-on system is very expensive because you have to buy Burton branded boots and the Burton branded step-on bindings, which is basically their top of the line. I mean, a setup is going to run you $400 minimum between the boots and the bindings, and because of the way the system works, you have to get step-on boots and step-on bindings to work with it. You can't just use your regular old boots. It's a double-sided technology here, so that's a big barrier to entry for most people. Just the boot and bindings can cost as much as a full setup would otherwise. Another con is they're also exclusive to Burton. Burton are the only ones that make the step-on system. They haven't licensed out the technology to other boot or binding manufacturers. You have to buy Burton, and that's not always a bad thing. Burton is one of the premier brands in snowboarding, but also choice is always better. And also the exclusivity to Burton kind of accounts for the price tag of it. And along with that exclusivity comes with, just like I mentioned before, a lack of options for boots. I mean, they have a few different boot options that have the step-on technology with them, but you're still limited to whatever, Burton decides to include. Overall, if you are a big resort rider, these Burton step-on bindings are kind of the perfect option for resort riding, in my opinion. They open the mountain up so much for you with honestly very little in terms of performance sacrifice. And that ease of use, that access to the mountain is, at least in my experience so far, unbeatable. There are other strapless binding options coming to market more and more every single day, but Burton were the first ones to do it super, super well, and so they're going to be kind of the trendsetters for this. And if you've got the money, if you're looking for something nice that's going to kind of improve your snowboarding experience at a resort rider, and especially for people who maybe have a harder time getting up and down, or maybe older riders who are just sick of all of the sit down and butt wet time, they're great for that. They eliminate it almost entirely. So it looks like that's about all we have time for this week on the Equipment Gnar podcast. Now for next week, I want to be going over the different styles of boards and what all of these weird words like camber, rocker, magnet traction, edges, what all of that stuff means and what it means for your experience up there snowboarding. Now, for next week, I also want to include feedback from you, the listeners. Please write into me at equipmentgnarpodcast@gmail.com, and I will talk about what y'all write about in next week's episode. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Equipment Gnar podcast. I'm Jim, the idiot who hosts this podcast, and I hope you have a great day.